So my apologies again for being late. Strategic leadership and the central theories. I think the key thing from a strategic leadership perspective nowadays is to try and balance the stability within the organization. What are the things that promote stability? What are the mechanisms we put in place to promote stability? What are the things we put in place to promote stability? Yeah, so we have security. What specific elements do we put in place to promote stability? What do we put in place to promote stability? Yeah, but I'm talking about specific official organizational arrangements. Remember, guys, it's your policies, it's your procedures, these formal organizational arrangements. So we'll always have policies, we'll have those kinds of plans of action, we'll have the guidelines that we get from our standard operating procedures. Why is it important to promote stability? Yeah, all of it taking us to our vision and mission, etc. Why is it important to promote stability? I think the reality is without stability, we'll have chaos, and we have these elements in place to avoid the sort of chaotic situation if we have a free for all. What is the problem when an organization is overly stable, where you so have your routines and your policies, etc., entrenched, and the culture entrenched that you can't change? What are the risks associated with overstability? There's no innovation. Yeah, absolutely. You become the realities that faced Google, not Google, the realities that became monotonous boredom. You become stale, essentially. You lose the ability to reinvent yourself. So you become incredibly monotonous, and you become stale, and you become irrelevant. So if we ask Nokia, if we ask Kodak, if we ask Mr. Blockbuster Video, there will be inefficiencies. The world will change and will move beyond you. So what organizations have to do is to balance the stability that comes with policies and procedures and their readiness for change. And it's quite a fine line. And the risk of not reinventing yourself, and the term that we use in terms of strategic management, of not having dynamic capabilities, is the fact that you are going to become incredibly irrelevant in terms of the environment. Really good organizations are able to reinvent themselves. Really good organizations have significant abilities in terms of dynamism, in terms of constantly finding ways of becoming and remaining relevant. And it's that challenge. And in terms of strategic leadership, it is the job of the strategic leader to sometimes act as the catalyst of that change, to provide the vision, to almost re-envision the future for the organization, and reignite when it becomes too boring and becomes too irrelevant. And you don't want to be the Blockbuster Video of the world. You don't want to be the Mr. Video of the world. You want to be the Netflix, and the ability to reinvent yourself is what Netflix has done incredibly well. I mean, from a video delivery service to what we have now. So for a strategic leader, it's that foot in both those areas. promoting stability because we don't want chaos, and then also the idea of making us ready for change. What we talk about in terms of modern organizations that essentially are able to reinvent themselves and empower people to make a contribution, that have moved away from job descriptions. We talk about and it's quite an interesting term, the so-called chaotic structure. So where we allow a bit of chaos, but we also have enough order so that we don't have the Wild West. The chaos comes from the idea that we want people to innovate. We want people to use those right brains of theirs. We want people to constantly question and challenge and find new ways of doing things. But you need order as well. And I quite like the concept of the chaotic structure, where you balance the two, where there is enough order, but that the order is not stifling in terms of contribution. And it's chaos and order. Yeah, it's chaos and order. It's that you don't stifle original thought, that you don't stifle innovation, that you don't stifle the fact that people in an organization can make a difference and find the ways of helping the organization reinvent itself. Again, we spoke about Steve Jobs, what happened when Steve Jobs came back, and the sort of reigniting effect he had in terms of Apple. So when we look at the three streams of strategic leadership, the first one we had already spoken about, which were the examples that we used to describe the upper echelon theory. Remember, we spoke about the sort of the great man approach, the sort of Vladimir Putin's, that without this individual, the organization cannot survive. And essentially that we see from an upper echelon's perspective that the top of the organization gives us direction. And then also the reality is that we see that organizational performance as the dependent variable. It's the consequence of the leadership actions. And we can see in terms of the measures of organizational success, return on investment, return on equity. Modern definitions obviously would include the notion of wealth creation for your stakeholders. So the upper echelon theory is still there. We still see some organizations that rely heavily and depend heavily on the ability of this individual to create a vision and give direction. But the truth is that we've seen the world being so complex that we cannot just rely on one person to do it. The reality is the world has become a serious mess, and we need to almost constantly think about how we can reinvent the organization to deal with this mess. My brain is quickly going to the thing I did tonight, and I used this as the introduction, as an indication how insane the world has become. Hold on a second, see if it'll open over that. And I'm not worried about it. But these are headlines from the last week's News 24. If we want to see how insane the world is and how difficult it is for one person to manage all of the realities of an organization, have a glance at those as headlines from the past week in News 24. Which of those stand out? Which of those make you nervous? Which of those tell us that we need a chaotic organization? Which of those will impact your organization, will impact South Africa? And these are actual headlines. They're not made up. I took them out of off the News 24 website. Yeah, the one that that requires serious attention. Is the first one there, how quickly it's escalated into full-blown war. And then, yeah, Gwede Matashe, somebody I don't have much time for, the idea of now that the executives for Transnet and Eskom are leaving. Essentially, he's referring them the mice and what they're running from. And they're running from political interference. The RAND manipulation and the impact of that on our economy. And then one that resonates with me was the fact that we are turning to powdered and liquid egg imports. I didn't even know those things existed. What is a liquid egg and a powdered egg? And you can see how immediately Pick and Pay and Checkers and Woolworths have realized that because of the avian flu, they've had to adjust. Does anyone know what powdered and liquid egg is? Can't even imagine bringing that into my house. And then, yeah, Motsepe is bank, the Time Bank and the disruptions that it's going to cause for Standard Bank and those kinds of places. And then, yeah, the stuff that we're interested in South Africa and will impact our organizations. The Google searches for artificial intelligence. And then, yeah, the one that I found very interesting is the role of chatbots as therapists. Any comments on that? Going to a chatbot. Oh, do you know what a liquid egg is, Mads? Oh my gosh. Okay, what is it? Is it pleasant or unpleasant?
So I only know from the perspective of you get the like Woolies sells the liquid white eggs that a person often buys for baking, but I know people who diet also buy the white because it's got no calories.
Okay. Oh, okay. Very cool. Yeah, the idea of what will happen to psychologists and therapists. The truth, though, is that some people found it helpful, some people found it cold, and some people were ambivalent towards it. Oh, okay, okay. Oh my gosh, okay. Guys, and then, yeah, the interesting one, how people are starting to use ChatGPT to plan a holiday in Cape Town, and that versus an actual travel agent. Who do you think was better, ChatGPT or the travel agent? No, it wasn't, Justine. It was the travel agent. ChatGPT was about 60% accurate. But travel agents are still ahead. But we know that as ChatGPT evolves and as they start looking at building logic into it, yeah, well, yeah, well, you can. I mean, there's a restaurant that only turns to ChatGPT for new recipes, and it's built its entire new menu around recipes that ChatGPT suggests. And then the last one was just about work, the reality of work, and how people want balance in their lives and don't work for a living anymore. It's what live for work. I can't remember the thing, but people want balance in their lives. The second one is positive agency theories. And essentially, it views the executive, the CEO, the senior managers as agents of the shareholders. And it's logical, because when we think of what shareholders want, they appoint a board of directors. The board of directors will then appoint a CEO, an executive, and the job of that CEO, the job of that board of directors is to represent the greater interests of the shareholders. So they have to look after their agendas. They have to make sure that they essentially live the wishes of your shareholders. And I think the idea is separating ownership and control, and then also the idea that how these shareholders shape what managers do. And you can see how they do it through contracts, reward structures, etc. What is good with that theory, if we can find anything good? And what is questionable about that theory? What is good about the theory? Think of it from a King report perspective. I think what is good is that from a governance perspective, you should be pretty safe. What is not so great about that theory? And it's a glaringly obvious problem with that theory. In terms of where we are from a sustainability, triple, quadruple bottom line perspective, and how we define organizational wealth creation and sustainability. It's self-interest. You cannot only worry about one specific stakeholder. The world has evolved beyond the idea that you can just look at the sort of traditional Milton Friedman approach, that the only job of an organization is to make a profit, is to serve the interests of the shareholders, and if you do anything outside making a profit, you in fact are behaving in an illegal way. Now remember, this is a theory from the 1970s, and it's been disproved over and over. But we still have people that think like that, and we need to remember that we have bigger stakeholders and broader stakeholders, and part of triple bottom line and quadruple bottom line is people, planet, profit, society, and looking after the natural environment. Yeah, still looking after the interests of the shareholders, and then purpose from a governance perspective. And then new leadership theories, and the idea that charismatic leadership is a new theory is a little bit questionable. Why has charismatic leadership received so much attention in the recent past? Why charismatic leadership makes such a comeback in the past? Yeah, they're able to inspire, absolutely, and it is about inspiring and inspiration. Yeah, what else? I think what's happened is that we've seen so many charismatic leaders start being successful, and what happens then is people start believing that the only way to go is to hire this charismatic person that is surrounded by this energy field that naturally attracts people to themselves. And yeah. Yeah, and the truth is, we see charisma go wrong there. There's so many negative elements of charisma and charismatic leadership. But it comes from the fact that if we look at some of the great leaders that we talk about in modern times, someone like Steve Jobs, very charismatic. Someone like Elon Musk, very charismatic. Someone like Donald Trump, although I despise the human being, for his followers, quite charismatic. And then add to it Richard Branson, who is the example of what a charismatic leader is. Transformational leadership, and we, I don't know if we've already looked at it or will look at it. We have looked at it, the sort of model based around acknowledging the importance of people and acknowledging the abilities within individuals to contribute to the success of an organization, changing, and then visionary leadership. Again, all we need to do is look at someone like Steve Jobs and the vision that he had for so many aspects of society. These great visionaries, the Henry Fords of the world, just see the world differently and often are the big disruptors in industries. So I think when we look at the sort of newer leadership theories, I think what we start to focus on is the management of meaning. What does the term management of meaning suggest? What does management of meaning suggest, and why is it important? Yeah, for me, it comes from communication, and it comes from the fact that we see great leaders are often great communicators, and great leaders are often very visible, and the idea of managing by wandering around is an essential part of what they do. And in terms of creating meaning and managing meaning, I think it's making sure that people are on the same place, on the same page, making sure that people understand where they fit into the bigger picture, why their contribution is valued, and where they fit into the vision of the organization, but done in a way that we don't want to stifle them. It is about bringing people into the ambitions that leaders have for an organization. And to do that and to get the buy-in and to get people on board, you have to manage meaning. You have to make sure that people understand why the organization exists, what we want to achieve, how we expect you to contribute, or the freedoms we give you in terms of contribution. And then just the newer theories that have evolved. I think the research into behavioral and cognitive complexity, and the importance of valuing people and valuing humans and valuing individuals in organizations. The idea of social intelligence. Anyone want to hazard a guess what social intelligence is? Remember, we've had IQ, we've had EQ, emotional intelligence, we've had SQ, we've had strategic intelligence, and now they're adding another one, the idea of social intelligence. What does the term suggest, social intelligence? Yeah, it's exactly. It's the idea of understanding social situations. It's the idea of networking. It's the idea of realizing that organizations don't operate in isolation from each other anymore. It really is about that ability to network, is to understand social situations, is to read and interpret, to steal Tiang's definitions there. But it really is and I just want to see if I have got this one. I don't know if this is going to move across now. Oh gosh, sorry. As I'm lecturing, I keep thinking of stuff that I've read. And how to do it. And I don't always like the idea of blogs, but this one I'll share with you. And it's very difficult to separate it from emotional intelligence. But have a look at that definition there. So managing your own feelings, and then the idea that you are, from an authenticity perspective, always receptive to ideas, always actively listening, always paying attention, and then real empathy as part of that. And then also to understand those sort of invisible interconnections, the things that are not obvious. And then it's about reading people's nonverbal behavior. Now, those all sound very simple, but it's the kind of stuff that makes you survive into the future. It's the kind of stuff that is part of leadership. Who's very good at those kinds of things? Who's very good at reading their own emotions, understanding why they feel what they feel? And then who's quite receptive, active listener, willing to listen, open to ideas? Yeah, in terms of what you do, absolutely. And then real empathy, and indicating empathy. And then reading the room, guys, open to ideas, and then reading the room. Yeah, willing to listen, very cool. And then very good at interpreting non-verbal behavior, made very difficult nowadays. Very cool. Very difficult nowadays when you think of how much interactions take place via WhatsApps and emails, and sometimes we forget the importance of non-verbal behavior. But we can see when somebody's actions don't match their reality through non-verbal behaviors. Yeah. And I think one of the things when you guys, yeah, study your masters and go on beyond this, or do your research, is to remember that these are new fields of research, and we cannot ignore these when you do your research next year, those of you that have left it for next year. And bear this little slide in mind when you're looking for topics next year. So if we look at the tenure of CEOs, I hate these kinds of generic things because the real world is not always like that. But the suggestion is that every CEO goes through those 5 stages, and at some point the CEO wouldn't fit the realities of the organization, and would be expected to move on. And when we look at those 5, the first one is where essentially you start your tenure and you look at sources, and often your mandate, as per the definition there, will come from your shareholders via your board of directors. What then happens is that the CEO starts to experiment. And I think that the truth is they start to see what will work, what do we keep of the old, what do we bring in, where do we need to rattle a few cages, where do we need to reinvent aspects of the organization, and always going to be part of their own values. And we see that when people from finance get promoted to CEO, the organization takes a very different look to when people from marketing get promoted to the CEO, or people from HR. And it's often based on the values that you've learned from your job. And then you look at your enduring theme. And it really is this idea of ultimately, what do we want to be remembered for? That theme, what do I want to be remembered for? What thumbprint do I want to leave on the organization? If you guys had to give me the enduring theme of the organizations where you're employed, what would that be? what would be your organization's enduring? So resilience. We've been knocked down several times and we don't give up. We tough, we get up and we redo. We learn and we essentially stand up after taking knocks. Is that about, I mean, it's a wonderful enduring theme. Yeah, I'm just, Justine, I'm thinking it's a brilliant, brilliant enduring theme. Because in a world where everything is insane, organizations will take knocks, people will take knocks, and resilience is a key survival strategy. I love that. Anyone else? What is your organization's enduring theme? Let's take it away from an organization, and what would your enduring theme be about your career? And I can see resilience being one of those as well, Justine. What is your organization's enduring theme? For me, learning are some of the is one of the themes that I've seen in organization. That and part of resilience is learning. So if you have learning as a theme, it means that you're constantly making sure that you are relevant. Others, resilience, learning. You could also have a customer-centered theme that will indicate what the CEO expects. And then we look at, oh gosh, why is this not happening? Convergence. Adaptability, without a doubt, where it's that light on the feet type approach to the world. If we look at convergence, I think this is where organizations start going sideways. And I think sometimes CEOs get to the point where they start believing that they know best because they've experimented, they've created this theme, it might have worked for the organization, and then essentially you start ignoring the signals from outside. And it's the opposite of absorptive and adaptive capacity. And it's almost at that point where we realize that the captain of the ship has to leave. And then dysfunction. I think this is where your strategic leaders become inhibitors of change. And I'm sorry to put Nokia in front of you again, but they believed in the candy bar design phone when people were moving to touchscreen phones. Is it fair to say that those are a good indication of what will happen to a CEO? Guys, we see it in sports coaches. We see it in successful sports coaches. Get given the mandate, start experimenting, and then create your theme. And then this convergence where you don't start listening to anyone else and dysfunction. That's why sports coaches get replaced every 5 or so years. They become stale. They essentially don't fit. They're not fit for purpose anymore. And we see it in organizations as well, where CEOs are asked to move on. And then visionary leadership. Yeah, I think it's this idea of your traditional leaders being worried about stability and preservation. Your visionary leader is this idea that somebody looks at the world differently, constantly finds a vision and creates a vision for the organization. And you can see there, the thinking is future oriented and it involves serious risk taking and often risk taking to the point that we start questioning our core business and we start questioning the way we do things. So visionary leadership, I think in terms of traditional leaders, your visionary leader, very, very dynamic, very much an interactive, because you have to get people to buy into your vision. So you would sell that vision, and it's not a top-down one. And then key in terms of this is that you look at content and context. Content in terms of what the vision says, and context in terms of how relevant that vision is in terms of where the organization is. And then there are a number of ways that it can be done. There's no single ingredient that says this is a visionary leader. And then, yeah, just if we look from a critical leadership perspective and a critical perspective, I think the truth is that we often look at leaders and think that they are going to save the company and they are going to not be, we will end up in a situation where we will not be able to do without them. I think the reality is we sometimes give strategic leaders way too much credit. The first one, I think sometimes you hit the ground running and the economy is doing great and the demand for your product is great. And often the success of a leader is determined by factors other than the leader himself. It's almost hitting or getting to the organization at the sort of sweet spot of the environment, at the sweet spot of what potentially is going to work. And then the second one, sometimes new CEOs don't have the ability to change everything. And then lastly is that sometimes when you're a follower, you allocate certain views of what a leader is. And if that leader doesn't fit what you believe they should be, you end up in a situation where the leader is unsuccessful. Okay. Guys, do you mind if we call it quits there tonight? I